welcome to Broken Entertainment. So we had Donald Glover come out on Twitter and say the reason, well here I'll bring up his specific words, that he's seen people on here having a discussion about how tired they were reviewing boring stuff, TV and film, and we're getting boring stuff, not even experimental mistakes, because people are afraid of getting canceled. So they feel like they can only experiment with aesthetic, and because some of them know they're not that good. And Twitter just, detonated like a bomb, right? Because they're like, oh my gosh, how could you possibly say these things? Well, because they're true. And, I'm not a big Donald Glover fan, but he's right. But there's more to it than that. And I was kind of thinking about it and doing other stuff, working on my book and so on. And then a video came up on the YouTube channel Alteori, which is a channel I subscribe to, that asks the question, why are modern movies so boring and so bad? And of course, this doesn't encompass every modern movie. And she makes some very good points and brings up some stuff that I'd really like to talk about here. So this is something of a response video. I'm not necessarily countering everything she says, but I'd like to highlight some of what she says more. And I will put links to her channel down below in the description so you can check her out. It's a good channel. Talks about all kinds of different stuff. This is about a 20-minute video, and she brings up the first point that I want to address is the issue of technology. And I'll go ahead and let the video play here for a second.
Had to be more creative with the work that they put out because we didn't have technology and green screen and all that stuff that we have now that it's honestly way cheaper than it used to be when it just came onto the scene. So there was a lot of on-set things, a lot of props, way more props. The sets had to be built. Some of the established shots had to be used as models. They had to paint these models to make them look realistic from the camera lens as though it's a real place and it's our size or to scale from our perception. I mean, there's a lot of work that went into these movies. And now, people don't have to do that. Now that we can bang movies out so quickly, at the speed of sewer rats fucking, it's like they don't really have to put that much into it. Because all that time and effort is to putting out as much as possible and hoping something sticks.
So, she talks about the issue of technology and how we've gone from building sets, building props, to just throwing things up on a green scene. There's a famous picture of... That's a comparison picture of George Lucas after he did the original trilogy with all the different props that were involved. And there's all kinds of stuff in this room around him, right? And then someone says George Lucas after he does the prequel trilogy, and you've got George Lucas in an empty room with a green screen. And that is a common thing. You see a lot of movies that completely forgo physical aspects. They barely have sets, if they have any at all. Everything is green screen. There's CGI all over the place. And sometimes it looks very, very good. The CGI in Godzilla vs. Kong, for example, is absolutely amazing. What this does is it allows you to make movies very, very quickly. If you're making sets and you're building props and you're painting models, it takes time. And I remember, it wasn't all that long ago, but a movie would come out and I'm like, that's really cool. And I want to see the sequel. And you knew it was going to be like 2 to 3 years before you saw the sequel. Now it's like, here's another one. One of the reasons I stopped watching the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I didn't lose interest. I just stopped caring enough because it was like, it started out as like a movie. Then you'd get a movie. Then you'd get a movie. Then it was like movie, and I'm like, I don't care enough to keep up with stuff put out that fast. And it's not that Marvel Cinematic Universe has made bad movies. They have. They've also made some very good ones. But when you put them out that quickly, there's a couple of things that happen. You have a corporatization of what's going on. You have the creation of a formula, and you have a tendency to kind of build the effects and then just kind of fill stuff in to make it work. So you can put these movies out really fast, and as you do those more, and this happened in particular with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you start to say, oh, okay, how do we make this work better? You know what? Well, let's get a director, and they're going to direct, but we're going to go ahead and put together the formula of the movie. And that's what they did. If you watch enough Marvel movies, you'll see this. There's a formula they all follow. And what that did was allow them to shit these movies out a lot faster. So you plug in the formula, you plug in the script to the formula, then you plug in the CGI, you grab yourself a director that's willing to just sit down in the chair and follow the formula, boom, you've got a movie. And you see that a lot, not just with Marvel. But the problem really isn't technology. Technology certainly facilitates this attitude, but it's not what created the attitude. What created the attitude was mega corporations like Disney wanting to put out easy to make stuff, do it fairly quickly, and move on. Make some money, pump out the next thing. So what they did is they realized they could use this new technology to kind of put the thumb down on script writers and directors and say, here's the formula, here's how things are going to work, go make it. So they did. And that's why you get stuff like some of the bad Marvel movies, like Raya and the Last Dragon, which is really just a couple of Disney movies put together, right? And it kind of follows the formula of Avatar: The Last Airbender as well. And you see this ultimate expression of this in the live action reboots that Disney does. Aladdin, Lion King, because they're already done. You don't have to do anything, right? All you gotta do, you plug in the CGI, you plug in the actors, you plug in the director, the story's already done, you make a couple of changes to make it quote-unquote modern, and poof, you've got a movie. They don't have to build the set, they don't have to do any of this and that, they don't have to come up with a brand new script. All you gotta do is take what existed before, make some modifications, and this is why reboots and sequels are so popular. Sequels take a little more work, but a reboot, you just take the movie, you maybe watch 5 minutes of it, you make something based off of that, and most of the work's already been done for you. You crap out the CGI, you crap out the green screen stuff, and there it is. Fast movie, doesn't take any creativity, just put it out there. We go, why are these reboots all over the place? Well, it's because it's easy. The movie's done. You just do it again, make a couple of changes to fit your agenda or whatever, and poof, there it is. There's your movie. No work, no effort, no creativity. And what that allows them to do is make more and faster, which means you can put more movies out in the course of a year than you could before, and now those movies being out faster, you get more of them, that means more people buy tickets, that means you make more overall money, even if individual movies don't necessarily do well. You don't see this with every movie or every studio, but the really big ones you see it a lot. You see it also with DC. I picked on Marvel a little bit. I'm going to talk about DC. Except DC doesn't know what their formula is. And they brought in Zack Snyder, and he's like, hey, here's what I'm going to do. And they're like, yeah, I guess. Okay, sure. And he makes a movie. And they're like, hey, that kind of worked. And then he makes Batman vs. Superman, and they're like, whoa, wait a minute. Not only did they realize they didn't like the direction he was taking things, they also realized he's willing to fight against him. We've seen reports of this now over and over again, of Zack Snyder fighting the studio to get the movie he wanted. That's not what they want. They just want someone to do the basic job of directing. That's why when they did the theatrical cut of the Justice League, they went out and they got Joss Whedon, because Joss Whedon is a formula guy. You plug him in, you tell him, hey, we want the Avengers, and you hope that it happens. Play around with some green screen crap. That's why Also, you can see these movies doing a lot of reshoots, and they go in and they change stuff around before the final movie comes out. Because, well, hey, it's all green screen anyway. You don't have to build new props. Just put the green screen up and go do it. I mean, a perfect example of being able to do that is the leaked stuff from when Zack Snyder did the shoot of Green Lantern that was going to be in the Justice League before they decided against it. And the actor is standing there in a motion capture kind of suit, and there's green screen behind him. You're like, okay, I've seen that before. Well, there's a zoomed out picture, and it's in the guy's driveway. So you don't need to put any of this effort into it, so you can just crap out movies faster. And the studios don't like people like Zack Snyder, because Zack Snyder, whether you like him or not, had a clear artistic vision. And when you watch the Snyder Cut, or you watch really any of his other movies, you see that. He has a clear artistic vision. He fights for what he wants. He gets that through. He's not the norm anymore. And Alteori brings up the technology, but really the technology has just allowed the studios more control. The technology itself isn't the problem. You can make some fantastic movies with all this technology, because the norm is to do things quick, by formula, put it out. The amazing thing is that they're still not that cheap of a movie, really, when you look at some of these movies and how much they cost to produce. But a lot of that money is now going towards other things instead of sets and props and so on. So we'll get to now her other point. Or I don't cover every point here, but this is another point.
Scene like this is powerful, it might offend some people, and that's gonna lose us money. But then the whole movie's trash and they end up losing money anyway. And I think we're at the point where we have to bring creativity back. I think there's still a lot of people out there that have creativity, but they're not allowed to express their creativity. Nowadays, the freedom of expression is being taken away, and that's killing art. And if we cannot express freely, we can't infect other people or inspire other people to also be creative. If people see that people have come before them have been shut down for their creativity, or there's no creativity there, it's not going to inspire them to be creative.
I agree with her 100%. When you shut down creativity, when you say, hey, that's offensive, you're not allowed to do that, that needs to be removed, or it needs to be labeled, or it needs to be deleted or shut down, then you have other people that come along, and there's nothing there. There's nothing to inspire them. I am inspired to create, was a long time ago when I was a kid, by Star Trek and Star Wars. And then later on Jurassic Park. And those movies, those TV shows, they can't be made today. We know. They've tried. Star Wars is a boring mess full of agenda and characters with no meaning. And Star Trek has become basically the same thing. But those movies and shows excited me when I was a kid and made me think about, gee, I would like one day to be like George Lucas. I would like to create something awesome that inspires others and allows them to see things differently and allows them to take a step away from things and just imagine something fantastic for a while. And as I got older, I got more interested in doing that, and I started to write more, and I started to take ideas that I was forming and try to put them together cohesively, and eventually I got to where I am now, where I am very, very close to sending a book to beta readers and getting myself published and getting out there because of those movies. If I had to be inspired by something that exists today, there isn't anything, unfortunately. What do you even point to? I'm not inspired by any of the movies and television that are out now. I used to, even as recently as you said, let's say 6 years ago, would see a movie and go, hey, I got an idea. Or, oh boy, I want to go home and I want to get started working on my book some more, because that gave me some some creative thoughts. Now the only way I get that is from either video games or books. And books are going down a dangerous path themselves, but that's a topic for a whole other video. She's spot on, because you shut all this down, and now what's inspiring? I used to see a Steven Spielberg movie, and I was like, there's someone creative and cool who's this is their passion. They want to make other people see things and imagine things. And now I see a Steven Spielberg movie and it's just his name on it. It's just a brand. He's lost all of his passion, all of his creativity and drive. It's all gone. And it's because of a number of things, partially because he's become so successful that he doesn't need that drive anymore and he's let it wither and die. But also because there's probably a lot of his movies that you couldn't make now either. In more than movies, too. We see it in comics. And the question is, okay, so where do you go from here? Are we just doomed to have boring, uninspiring stuff? Well, there's the potential for that. There's the potential that you don't inspire the next generation of creatives and they just don't exist. But I think creativity is so strong in some people that it doesn't matter. Inspiration from other sources allows them to kind of focus perhaps, but it's still always going to be there. And maybe instead of saying, I want to be like George Lucas, they're going to be saying, I want to break the mold. But we have, in the place of these things, seen a surge in indie stuff. Comics, movies. You can go on YouTube and see awesome indie movies. Most of them are short, but they're there, and they're pretty fantastic, a lot of them. And that's what's starting to fill the void, because people are shifting away from the formula, and they're looking for other outlets, and they're starting to see these other things, and you're seeing a lot of great indie comic sales. You're seeing a lot of these great indie movies on YouTube and other places starting to get some traction and some attention, and you're starting to see a surge in self-publishing. Not in traditional publishing, there is that, but in self-publishing, because traditional publishing has begun to limit creativity as well, and people are simply sidestepping it. But again, we'll cover that another day. So she is 100% spot on here. Is the third major point that I want to address that she has to say, and I'll let it play just like all the other ones.
Happens when you allow people to cancel or suppress other people's creativity. We're not allowed to tell stories the way we want because it offends a very small section of people. Well, then what happens? Other people out there, so you get canceled. You decide that you're going to say, I'm sorry, which is what you should never do. You should never say sorry for being creative and expressing yourself.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. And she goes into some more detail, but this is the biggest problem we're seeing with social media right now. People do dare to put things out there, and they get immediately assaulted. Oh, this is offensive. You used the wrong word, or you're the wrong skin color to write that story. You're the wrong gender to write that story. You don't have the right sexuality to write that story. Well, when you do that, you shut people down and they stop. And unfortunately, most people don't understand yet how to respond to that kind of behavior. But the response is to ignore them. Everybody that has created something and has been attacked by these people and has ignored them, and I'm not saying engage them, flat out ignore them. When you ignore them, they lose all power. What happens most of the time, though, is somebody creates something and they go, ah, 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 and they're like, oh my gosh, you're right, I'm so sorry. And then they self-censor. There's a very good example of this in publishing, and I don't remember the author's name or the name of the book, and it doesn't really matter. They got rid of their own book. that canceled its publication. Why? They were an Asian person, if memory serves, and they wrote a fantasy novel. And in that fantasy novel, there happens to be a race of people who are slaves. So Twitter got up on their high horse, which is stacked on top of another high horse, and they shouted down with their megaphone, and they said, "That's not your story to tell, because you're not black." Well, of course it's your story to tell. It's not a biography. You're telling a fantasy story. But the author said, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to offend anyone." And they canceled the publication of their own debut novel. And that's where power comes from for all of this. Is people put something out there and somebody goes, "Oh my gosh," and they get their other 12 weirdo friends and they make a little circle around you and they start throwing rocks at you and you go, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to offend you." And that's what we're left with. And that's why so many movies either kiss the ass of the agenda of Hollywood or don't have anything to say. But for the most part, when these movies come out and they have nothing to say, and they also have no risks that they take, and they also don't do anything new and interesting from a narrative point of view, you just get kind of... Well, you get The Force Awakens. What was The Force Awakens? A New Hope with shinier paint. And more boring characters. You know, used to talk about Rey being a Mary Sue. I almost called her Mary Sue being a Rey. I used to talk about Rey being a Mary Sue. But let's go another step farther. And the question I will leave you with on this specific topic is, name some character traits of Rey. Go ahead. Name something interesting about Rey. And I don't mean she's from Desert Planet number 3. And I don't mean she's a scavenger. I mean actual traits. Some actual qualities of the character. Name 6. You won't be able to. Or you'll find it very, very difficult. And the most interesting character, Finn, they squashed him like a bug when they found out he was interesting. So that's what happens. Now you could argue, well, The Last Jedi took risks, and look what happened. Yeah, well, The Last Jedi took the wrong kind of risks. It took the kind of risks that say, well, our fan base doesn't really matter, and neither does canon, and neither does characterization, and neither does consistency within the setting or world building. Alright, so let's go on to the final point I want to address, because I think it's possibly the most important one.
In Christ. These people are so against religion, but they don't realize that their actions are exactly like the hyper-religious. So it's interesting that we're having this discussion because a lot of people have been seeing it. And I have been calling it out. I've been noticing it as well. And so what is the solution for this? Well, I think the solution for this is to just tell stories the way they're meant to be told. YouTube and other big companies made a mistake when they started apologizing to a group of people that were minuscule in comparison to the actual group of people that weren't as vocal, that were responsible for 90% of the earnings that these studios get for their work. We should let money talk. If someone's upset about something, keep doing it. And if you're losing money, it's not working.
Bingo. So, what I'm saying, in complete agreement with Alteori, and hopefully to push it another step farther, forget these people. Make your art. Write your story, make your movie, draw your comic, and forget through the whole process. Stop self-censoring. And this is something she doesn't point out, but I will. People writing now self-censor. They say, "Oh shoot, I don't want to." Even I have done this. I have caught myself doing this, saying, well, I don't want to take it that way because then people might get bothered. But no, because fundamentally and most critically, with communication and entertainment, you do not have the right not to be offended. If somebody writes something and it's horribly offensive and 95% of the world is like, holy cow, how could you ever decide to write that? What were you thinking? That's so offensive. Then, well, it's out there. Okay? It's out there. Because offensive things sometimes challenge us to think about our worldview and to think about how things are and to say, this is not how I want to be. This is not how I want the world to be. This is something I want to work against. Offensive things draw our attention, and I'm not saying go out and be a shock jock, okay? Don't go out and just be like as offensive as you possibly can. What I'm saying is write your story, draw your comic, make your movie, and don't worry about these people. And then, if you're thinking to yourself, hopefully I'm not doing something that portrays some group in the wrong light. Well, then you have other people in the process, right? That's what other people are for. When you write a story or a book, beta readers are for that, among other things. Where they can say, whoa, this isn't how this works. This would bother an entire ethnicity or what have you. And what you should be doing to avoid doing that sort of thing, and we're talking about very large numbers here, is you do your research. What we're talking about, what Alteori is talking about, and what I'm talking about aren't large numbers. It's the occasional person reads it and they get offended by something stupid. That's going to happen. People do not have the right not to be offended. You, however, have the right for self-expression. Write your book, draw your comic, make your movie. And forget Twitter, forget social media, forget cancel culture. Just make it. Because I'll tell you now, the greatest works in the history of humanity offended people. And sometimes greatly. If you look at Dante's Inferno, that pissed off some people a lot. But look at where it stands today. And you can cite plenty of examples from the 30s, 40s, and before that, and after that. And these works would have never stood at the pinnacle of human entertainment and human thought if the author or the writer or the drawer, the artist, what have you, if that person self-censored, they would have never stood at the top. So you have to take risks. You have to be creative. And yes, you might offend somebody. Oh well. Let them be offended. Your job is not to keep everybody else from being upset. Your job is to put yourself out there. And if you make a blunder, if you do something that does genuinely offend a huge amount of people, and it was genuinely a mistake, then it's something you can learn from and avoid next time. Don't worry about these weirdos on Twitter. Everybody succeeding now ignores that group. Every single one of them. And everybody who has stumbled and faltered after succeeding has started worrying about that group. So do your thing. Really. If people get offended, oh well. And that's really what we all have to do as creators, is put ourselves out there and get those indie things out there, because I was talking about it in a previous point. The void gets filled by indie creators. So do not hesitate to go out there and write your stuff. Put it out there. And I know it can be scary. You're putting yourself out there. You're going to be judged. There will be people who get offended. There will be people who don't like what you're doing. There will be people who say, this is garbage. This person couldn't write their way out of a paper bag. And I keep using writing as an example because I'm a writer. Let me tell you, one of the most successful fantasy authors of the modern era is Brandon Sanderson. And I was just reading reviews of one of his books on Audible. And people say that about him too. People say that about everybody. So just put yourself out there. It's a leap. It's scary. Do it because the world needs solid, good entertainment that doesn't worry about what a few people on Twitter have to say. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Hit the bell for notifications, and I will see you next time.